So, hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks. I am your host, Carolyn Hines, and this is the podcast/YouTube channel where I speak to film creatives about their work, the industry, and what inspires them as creatives. And today I am joined by writer and director Murad Abu Eisheh to talk about his new short film, Tala'Vision, which is a film about an 8-year-old girl, Tala, who is basically confined to her home because of the reign of terror created by the ISIS army. And so she's not allowed to leave her home. She can't watch TV because of a new ban that was created. And so this film goes into how not only war, but also isolation affects children on a fundamental level. So thank you so much, Murad, for speaking with me today about this film. So first of all, I read that you said that you were inspired to create this film when you read an article in 2014 when ISIS was beginning to implement their ban on TVs in Syria. Because I know before they did the TV ban, they were basically banning like different forms of entertainment as well, because they were banning music, they banned smoking, and they were also controlling how people dress. Like for instance, like women were required to wear the niqab, which is the veil over their face, but then men were also told they can't wear like tight clothing. So men had to only wear loose clothing, and everyone had to wear beards. So, but what was it about the ban on the TV in particular that really caught your attention, that made you inspired to create this story?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. They were banning so many things, as you said. I mean, to ridiculous levels. Like men weren't allowed to wear jeans. Like they're really like having these weird rules. And every once in a while back then, I was like reading one of those new rules, and I was like, yeah, okay, they're really going, like, these bunch of people are really crazy. The entire world viewed them as like terrorist crazy people, which they are. But then they banned TVs, and then that stayed for me, like, because I grew up attached to our TV set. It was my personal window to the world. As I mentioned several times, talking to people I know, like when we started working on this project, if someone would have taken away TV from me when I was a little kid, I wouldn't have been the same person I am today. It was really my only communication tool to the world. And this small piece of news stayed with me because I started imagining hundreds of thousands, actually millions of children living in Iraq and Syria under their control, with no access to internet, and now TVs are gone, and basically their only window to the outside world would be taken, and whatever ISIS would tell them, they would definitely believe, because I mean they have no alternative like vision to whatever the outside world offers. And that really stayed with me for a long time. Because I truly believe that a lot of problems in the Middle East, they start with children. And when children's dreams are broken, they become these broken adults, and they feed into the same cycle of violence and misunderstanding. And so I think the core issue is with our children here, and how to deal with them, how to talk to them, how to open their eyes to the world. And that is where ISIS struck the hardest, I think, and destroyed an entire generation to come, which will take many generations to fix. And I just kept thinking about like children, and especially girls. And I think girls had it more than boys in these situations, because they were fundamentalists. They were, misogynistic system, empowering men and degrading women. So I really it stayed with me for a long time. And after a period, I started working on the Syrian-Jordanian border. When I saw a little girl, an orphan, crossing in the middle of the desert, following like a bunch of people, and she was holding her bag on top of her head and just walking, and she was, I think, 7 or 8 years old, and the look on her face stayed with me for a really long time. She looked traumatized. I can't describe how like she looked. It was absolutely, you can see that this person is damaged, and she would need help for many years to come. And I kept thinking to myself, what could be this little girl's story? And sort of these two thoughts came together, the ban of the TV and seeing that girl, which led to the writing of the script of Tala'Vision.
The thing with this story that, as you said, one of the things that really struck me is that you centered a little girl in the story, because like while all children, boys and girls, are like horrifically impacted by the war and like these kind of situations, I think that, as you said, for girls it's a bit more difficult because there is the concept of gender and how being female is another aspect of them of their identity that's targeted. And as a little girl, like for Tala, like she doesn't have her mother is gone, so it's just her dad. And in the film, like the only female person that we see apart from Tala is an old lady, but she's basically stuck inside her own home. Like she's surrounded by the walls of her home, and she can't come outside as well, right? Because again, she's female, and them being outside places them in danger. So Talad also doesn't have female companionship. She doesn't have female guidance. She has no women that she can rely on. And her father does the best he can, but he can't be home most of the day because of like he's trying to find ways to provide for her. So I want to start talking about how children are, to me, the most impacted when it comes to stories of war, especially when they grow up, where they're born into war and they grow up in worlds and in cities and towns and countries where war is the state of life for them. Like this is their fact of life. So can you just talk about having that be one of the main aspects of the film, because like this is all she's known.
Yes, I mean, true. For Tala, she was born into the situation. We try into the film to portray that this is normality for her. In one of the scenes, she's watching TV in this half-destroyed bathroom, and in the background, you see like this destroyed city. But for her, it's everything she knows. Like this is not odd. This is the normality. And I wanted to portray that for a little girl born into that situation, and for everyone who gets born into such a situation, they do not realize that this is not okay. They do not realize that this is not the norm. And for them, hearing gunshots all the time or bombs dropping, I met a lot of people coming out of war situations. They don't flinch, like they lost this basic human instinct to protect yourself because they were so normalized by war and by dropping bombs, and for her, when she's trying to sleep and a bomb is dropping, this is normal. Like this is not something that'll make her flinch or anything. And we try to play on the psychology of it. We played with the sound design in the film. We tried to bend the sounds of the bombs to creatures, like how a child mind would work to adjust this reality towards her. I mean, it's definitely a very traumatic thing to go through. And when we casted Eisheh, actually, she's a Syrian girl. She was born into a war situation, but she was quite young when they moved to Jordan. I think she was around 5 when they came to Jordan. And when you meet her, you think she's a happy child. And that's what I thought. And then I got to know her in the months in the pre-production. And slowly I became to the realization that she is traumatized by the war. Her family is traumatized. Her father is traumatized. And I had to speak to child psychiatrists, children actor therapists, to be really careful about how to deal with her, not to increase this trauma, and try to be part of the solution actually for her. The first clue for us wasn't through Tala that they were traumatized, actually was through her dad. Because after we casted her, I sat with the dad and we did a reading of the script, just me and him. And then he started crying in the reading. And that was my first realization that, okay, this is really heavy for him, how it must have been for the little girl, because this is a grown man we're talking about. And he was so touched by the script that he told me if he knew earlier what the story was about before we casted, he would have not agreed to it because he thinks it's too traumatizing. And at the same time, in these preparation months, I slowly got to know Tala. I got to know like her problems, her psyche, how, like I really tried to dig deep into it. My main objective was to become her friend. And at the shooting, not one member of the family came to the shoot. Like her dad came once for 10 minutes just to say hello, and then he left. He just couldn't help it to see this production design that we created, this war zone area. This was really heavy for them to see. Yeah, but it was quite challenging to deal with this entire topic.
And the fact, and you're saying that you yourself didn't recognize that how traumatized she was at the beginning, it kind of speaks to how much of a survival instinct people and children who grew up in those situations have to learn to develop. Because it's one thing, I think, when like they don't have like almost like the fight or flight response, where if they hear a bomb drop, the natural response is to like startle and to like look around and run. But they've been so desensitized to the sound of bombs and those kind of things. They've grown accustomed to that. But then also that they're able, even once they're out of this situation, they've learned to kind of mask that trauma. They've learned to kind of not move past it for sure, but way how to just cope, right? And how to like live.
It's actually not even coping. It's actually more or less acting that it's fine now. It's not, I think it's like your body or your psyche or themselves like lying to themselves that they are fine now and they're out of the danger and now things are normal. But I think it's actually acting. It's really like and in general, psychology and like taking care of your mind and talking to a psychiatrist, it's such a taboo topic in the Middle East. Like, not like people are proud to go and take care of their minds and like talk to a psychiatrist. People call them crazy. So it's quite the struggle to be able to open up and talk about these topics. And I feel very happy that our production was there to help Eisheh and her family, because they were sort of forced to talk to us through this entire experience and like slowly open up and know that it's fine to talk about what they went through. It was quite difficult for all of us. I mean, we are not trained people. We're just normal people, with like normal reactions. And I mean, from my part, as I mentioned, I tried to speak to therapists and know what role I could play as a director and as a human into their journey of recovery, which I hope we contributed. And definitely, I mean, after the shoot, before the shoot, I sat with her dad and we talked about like forgetting that she's traumatized and everything. This entire experience for a normal child would be too much because it's a lot of attention, child actors like getting too much attention and like going through this entire experience. That plus her past experience in war. So on top of each other, it's like such a big experience for a little girl to go through. And after the shoot, I sat with the dad and he was like, you know what, Murad, you were correct. She's completely changed now. But for the better. Like, I was like, what do you mean? How is she changed? And he was like, she has no more opinions. She's more outspoken. She's, like she's her own person. And I was like, okay, that's not bad. Because we did like all these confidence exercises. She saw all these like women working on our sets, heads of departments, bossing men around, which is not very usual in her bubble. So I think she got inspired somehow to be like more of a stronger person and her own self, which made us really happy, like the change that occurred to her. Until now, we're in such good contact with her, and we're like keeping up with her education and everything. So we hope we were a good impact on her life.
You said that the dad, he said that if he had known what the story was before he had agreed to let her be cast, he wouldn't have done it. But did he ever say exactly what was it that made him keep her with the production? Because he could have pulled her out. And like once he found out, he could have been like, I can't do this. I can't have her go through this. And so what was it that made him go along with having Eisheh be a part of the production?
I mean, we did the reading almost a month before the shoot, so it was quite a late stage when he got to see the scripts. But But at the same time, I think he got to know us by then on a personal level, and he knew that we mean no harm, and we were really trying to. I think he understood that it is important to tell this story. He mentioned it to me once that he thinks it's really important for people watching this film to realize like that this is one story of hundreds of thousands of people and how children are traumatized. And I think especially because of their personal experience and what they had to go through with ISIS, I think at the same level of him not wanting to go through the trauma, he wanted to do something against it. And he wanted to say out loud to the world in an indirect way that he wants to be against what happened to them. He doesn't want it to happen again to anyone else. So I think he was on the fence with that idea of him trying to implement change by agreeing to them being part of this project. Yeah.
No, I think that's great because like the film is a way to bring attention to the impacts of war on these children and to how much it's affected them, and it's still affecting them because like even once they leave the country and if they go to a separate location, the war isn't over. Like trauma takes years upon years to process and to work through and to like find a way to cope and like especially with regards to like mental health, like for many people like mental health is so important, but coming from an extremely traumatic situation like that, it takes a lot of work, but also I think it takes so much courage to be able to push forward and to live their lives, and using a story like this to basically say, yeah, ISIS is doing way more damage than most people are thinking. Because like when you think more people are thinking like the bombs and the guns and like what we see on the news, but the news also doesn't really talk about the micro, which is like how it impacts like children and people on an individual level, right? So I think the film is great for that.
I mean, that was my first and main focus, that what I wanted, like from the moment we started production on this film, I made it clear to everyone working on this project with me that this film is not about war. This film is about the effects of war on little children. We didn't want to show war. Like we tried to suppress war as much as possible in the film. We like even watching it, you do not see much of outside. It's all from the perspective of the little girl, which her world is more or less inside the apartment. She does not understand what is happening outside, and that's exactly the seed I wanted to put the audience, and like the understanding of a 7-year-old in such a situation, like banning TVs. She doesn't know why her dad got rid of the TV. Like she doesn't understand the war and the politics and everything behind that. And she just have such a simple dream of like, okay, I want to watch TV. Like simple dreams, nothing too crazy. And these are the things that, like when you're suppressing children and their dreams on such a level, they will never think bigger. They will never dream bigger. They will never aspire to something bigger. So yeah, I think it's quite important to be aware of this. And we didn't want to as well connect the story to ISIS in particular. We didn't want to connect the story to Syria or to Iraq. Like we didn't name the place where the story takes place at. We tried to keep it more like generic. While writing the script, an Iranian friend of mine, she read it and she called me and she was crying and she was like, Murad, she went through the same exact situation when the revolution happened in Iran, when they banned media and TV. And she was like, this is like touching on so many levels, And nowadays it's repeating itself in Afghanistan, and you're seeing what's happening with Taliban taking over, and like the entire same story is repeating itself again. And I think it's such an important time to stand up and like ask the world not to normalize what's happening in Afghanistan and try to save what could be saved from the childhoods and the dreams of these children and women that are being suppressed now. Every day I'm opening the news and I'm reading something new from there, like this new ridiculous law, like last week, women can't walk more than 70, like get away from home more than 70 kilometers. They can't work. They can't go to school. Girls are not allowed to go to school. It's happening like in some places in India. I read an article the other day. It's really, I feel like this story, a lot of people relate to around the world. And it's such an important time, and to spread such a message of mental health care for children, and realize that the problems start there with like tiny little things.
It does. So I want to get a bit into the narrative of the film too, because you mentioned that, and it's kind of, and something you mentioned about Eisheh kind of ties into the film itself directly. Is like you talked about like what she does, like her coping mechanism is a type of acting where like, like they're like, putting on a facade of like who they think everyone wants them to be, or what they wish they could be without the trauma. And we get that in the film with Tala, because like she having grown up in this situation, as you said, it's all normal for her, but she doesn't, when her, there's a difference when during the day, like who she is during the day versus who she is during the night. Like during the day, she's more bubbly. Well, not bubbly. She has more energy. Not bubbly. She has more energy. Like she moves around more, and she, like she when her dad, after her dad throws out the TV, she literally starts climbing the walls. And I thought I looked at it as kind of a literal and metaphorical representation of where she was mentally. Like she's just like she's starting to, like, the boredom is really starting to set in, and she can't talk to her best friend Ahmad because he's sick and he's across the street, but she can't leave the home. And like she's moving around, she's curious, she's looking for things to do, she's coloring, she's writing letters to herself on paper. But then at night, when everything is dark and like settled, like that's when you really start to see the fear and the anxiety that she has. So can you just talk about creating those two particular tones with Tala and with the film?
I mean, we really wanted to create like different balances between of her being a child and a real child, like wanting to break free, wanting to explore the world. This curiosity, I think, is not broken easily, even in tough situations. Like a child stays a child. When they remove the TV from her, her boundaries become more closed. So naturally, she's going to try and fight against it, and she's going to look for a different window for herself. So she's, trying to entertain herself. And then the idea of getting another TV, like she sees it down the street. So this balance during the day of that Tala that is trying to break free and being more brave, versus the Tala at night where these demons come through the sounds of the bombs, and like you feel her inner self as well, and around her father that she's more retracted, and she's not open even to her own father. Like there's like some sort of I don't know the English word exactly, but it's not a loving relationship per se. They clearly love each other, but like you see it in the film that there's like a barrier between them. And I think part of it is because, okay, both of them are traumatized. The father has different priorities, like keeping them alive, keeping them safe. And for her, she doesn't understand a lot of it. And for her dad is more like, she doesn't understand why he's doing these things to her. So like there are different parallaxes here between like father-daughter relationship, and between herself and her inner self at night, and herself during the day, and wanting to break free out of that. So I wanted to sort of create different balances inside her character, which kind of reflects the reality of like how children kind of cope with traumatic situations as well. They create boxes, for themselves, and they try to navigate through these boxes.
Yeah, children are great at adapting to situations, and Tala does that because once her dad throws out the TV, she's like, I'm gonna find an alternative, and she's like, I'm gonna fix this problem, and she fixes the problem by first thing first, literally preparing herself to go outside, because like she puts on the big shirt, her dad's shirt, and she knows enough that she has to put her hair up and wear a hat to cover her head to go outside, because she knows as a girl she's not allowed to go outside and she knows that if she encounters not only grown adults, but also even boys, because she faces there's a couple scenes where she's faced kind of like a belligerent attitude and a mean attitude from one of the boys in her neighborhood. So she knows that she has to be prepared to go outside. And then once she does, she very sneakily, I'm impressed she was even able to lift the TV, because those old TVs are not light at all. But
She
it shows how
actually lifted
determined
it.
she is.
Yeah, she actually lifted it on set. Like I was like, "Are you like we can get you like a dummy one?" And she was like, "No, I want to lift it." Blah, blah, because she saw like the other like production people putting it, and I think she was like a bit competitive, and she was like, "No, I want to lift it," and she was like really lifting it, and we were like all very nervous because she's like becoming like this was late in the shoot, and she was like slowly becoming opinionated and like, "No, I want to do this," and we were like, "Okay, let's see it. Like, let's see it on camera." And I feel like you feel it a bit on camera, like her determination that I want to carry it. So it kind of worked out for us.
No, she like I kudos to her, because I've lifted. I know how heavy those old TVs are. They're not like but like you mentioned, like you talk about the confidence, and you do see that in her, because like one of the scenes with her that I think is really interesting, especially for Eisheh, is like you see like so much potential in her as a young girl. Is the scene where she's in the living room and she has the letter, and just the way she's animated and reading this letter to herself. And again, it shows like how ingenious children are, because she has this whole dialogue. She's created this whole dialogue and this story in her mind. And then there's another scene where her dad is talking to the neighbor, and she's coming up with this dialogue and in like figuring out what she thinks they're saying. And I want to talk about the friendship that she has with this unseen boy, because Ahmad, like he's sick and we don't know what he looks like, we don't know who he is, but like you just from her perspective, you understand how much she loves him and how much she values their friendship, and and both of their love of TV and watching football. So can you just talk about that particular aspect of the story?
I mean, the character of Ahmad and her relationship, like other than that he's sick and like he might be like, we didn't specify, but like he could be like injured from the war, something happened to him, and his dad is trying to save his life as well. Other than that, the fact that she can't see him due to she's a girl and he's a boy, and they're not allowed to play together anymore because there is this gender segregation. So I mean, we tried to play on that. We wanted to create, as I mentioned, this isolation. And we thought, what a better way to create this isolation by not allowing the audience to see her friend, as she is not allowed to. So we kept his character in the dark, and like you kind of imagine what kind of boy he is and what kind of friendship they had. I mean, and it puts her as well on the fence, because she's stealing this TV. She's putting her dad into the situation. And at the end, I mean, I don't know, like if we should spoil the end, but it puts her as well on the fence with, okay, his dad wants to save his life and wants to take the money, and he's using that threat against my dad, so it's like, I wanted to create this social complex situation where you're neighbors and you're taking care of each other. But at the end of the day, it's each man for himself in such a situation. It's like every parent would do whatever it takes to protect their own child. So it plays on that as well. And it doesn't mean that there are bad people. It just means that people do whatever it takes in these extreme circumstances to survive, actually. So I think in the depths, like all these relationships have like big representations within the social structure of what a war is and how people deal with each other in war. And we try to play on it and at the same time keep it as simple as it is, because at the end of the day, it is a short film.
No, I think you did a fantastic job of like getting so much of that context into such a short span of time. And speaking about like what people will do, especially parents will do whatever it takes to protect their own selves and their kids, and especially in stressful situations like that. I kind of saw that in Tala too, where like when her dad was speaking to her, he was actually explaining to her why she can't have the TV, but she's so caught up in her own psyche and in what she wants and what she wants to hear that she completely drowns him out. And I love the sound design for this film, because like you highlight specific sounds and then you mute certain sounds. So like one of the sounds that you do mute is like the dad's voice. Like it's only in specific scenes that we get to hear him talk. But in some of the most important scenes, you can't hear him, because from Talas' perspective, she doesn't want to hear anything he has to say, because she's like, you're giving me bad news, so I'm gonna like completely ignore everything you have to say. And like what happens at the end, like you realize that happens because she couldn't hear him. And just like I just thought it was so profound, because like she, as a child, she's not going to fully understand, as you said, what's happening. But as she grows older, she's going to realize this one decision that I made this one time when I really should have been listening to my dad has changed the entire course of my life. So so for you, like when you were writing the script, like where did that particular part of the story come from?
I mean, it really, I mean, it comes a lot from my own childhood. I mean, I think you relate, everyone lived their childhood, and you have these situations that you lived with your parents, like not on an extreme level, but like when your parents are like not happy with you and they're like telling you off or something. And as a child, you're just like, like you get like you try to ignore them, and I don't know, you play something with your hand, and like just try to ignore whatever like wisdom or like telling off or whatever they're trying to tell you, because at the end of the day you are a 7-year-old, and it is sort of your job not to listen to your parents somehow. So in that scene in particular, I thought the dad is telling her, but when I was writing it, I was like, it's too grown up for her to understand. And then I just created this game, like this, I don't know what is it called, the one with the color, the cube.
Oh, the Rubik's Cube.
The Rubik's Cube. And she has one, and she keeps on turning it and turning it and turning it. And you realize that she's not playing with it. Like she's not trying to find the cube. She's just like focusing on it so she can drown her father away, and she doesn't want to hear him. So we came up with this idea of, okay, like we need to play with her perception and what the audience understands of her perception. So we tried with sound design to focus on small things and drown in like parallel other things as well. I mean, another thing in sound design that you wouldn't see, like you wouldn't notice watching it on a laptop screen, when you watch it in the cinema, whenever she's sitting inside at the apartment, the entire sound is mono, and it's on one speaker in the cinema. And every time she's closer to the window, the sound design opens up to more speakers. And when she goes outside, it opens up to Atmos. And when she's going back inside, it closes up. So we try to play on like how the world opens up only through sound, like depends on where she is in the apartment or where she is closer to the outside or inside. So that kind of took a while to realize in post-production, but luckily with COVID lockdown, we had enough time to play around and like get things done.
So I want to talk a bit more about the sound design, because as I said, that's I think one of my favorite parts of the film is like the way you amplify specific sounds. Like you just talked about how like when she moves from different locations, it changes atmospherically, but then when it comes to like on a more personal level, it does like change, because there's a scene where she's hugging the neighbor and you can hear his stomach growling. And I rewatched the film, so like the first time I watched it, I'm like, is that my stomach growling? And I was like, what's happening? So when I watched it over a second time, I'm like, oh, it's him. But then like there's other sounds that you hear, like very specific sounds are amplified, like the turning of a page when she's reading the book. And then there's like the sound of like we talked about, like the sounds of the airplanes flying overhead, or like maybe bombs dropping in the distance. But then there's other sounds. Excuse me, I'm just here looking at my notes. But then there's sounds like the kids playing outside. When she's inside, she's isolated, she's by herself, but she can hear the other kids running down the street and playing. And they're playing specifically football, which is her favorite sport, which is which I found was interesting as the thing that really catches her attention. And like that's to the fact that it's kids playing football that really kind of like drums home the fact that she can't get anything that she wants. There's nothing that she wants that she can get. And for other people, just hearing kids playing football may seem like not that big of a deal, but for her, because football is her main source of entertainment, this was the way that she bonded with like Ahmad. That was their thing. And so she can't watch it on TV, but all she can do is hear the boys outside playing. So, and then like there's the sounds that are muted, like we talked about the dad, like his voice gets muted, but then like there's other things like where she's breathing and you can hear her when she's breathing, like you can, like it really comes through in specific scenes. So I just want you to talk about like those specific aspects of the sound design, because like for me, I'm as a visual and auditory person, like I pick up I have like slight hearing loss, but there's certain sounds that I really enjoy hearing because it kind of like shows like isolation but in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, we wanted, again, I think we wanted to play on like her eagerness to do certain things, her ability to drown certain things psychologically, like drown the war sounds, you know, like she's drowning them or turning them into different, like if you listen closely, you could hear like dragons and like whales, and like really the war sounds are not really war sounds, they're other animals. So like drowning or changing these sounds into different sounds, and at the same time concentrating on certain sounds. So like when she's standing on the window and seeing the kids playing outside, although the neighbor is cooking and talking to her, she's focusing more on the kids outside and they are more far away from her. So it's more or less like psychological play for the audience to realize what she's yearning for as a character and as a person. We tried to suppress the things that didn't like her, she didn't like, and like push the things in sound design that she yearned for. And at the same time, I mean, it is at the end of the day psychological. Like we were sitting in the studio and we were like, okay, what does she want? What does she yearn for? What does she want to hear? And we highlighted all these sounds and we thought, okay, how can we push these sounds like to the forefront of the film to realize, okay, this is the things that she wants without saying them. Like there is not much dialogue in the film. And we just wanted to visually and with sound note like, okay, she wants 1, 2, 3 without saying it actually. And I mean, they're really like, we can go through the entire film. There are so many like play with sound in it. The breathing, as you mentioned as well, especially like we focused on breathing, especially the moments she's going outside of the house, because this is new territory for her. She's never been outside. Her anxiety is pushed to the maximum, you know, like she knows that she's breaking the rules, and there are these demons playing in her head. So we try to focus more on her inner psyche and the moments. It's such a simple thing to write, I think, like, she goes outside the apartment, but we made it such a dramatic scene of a girl walking down the stairs and like leaving the building, that she's going outside, she's hearing the ball as if it's like a bomb, and then she's hearing the plane and it's turning into different sounds. And at the end, she's seeing the TV and you're back in reality. Like you hear the realism. She's out of her anxiety and she knows like, I want to get that TV. So it's somehow a psychological journey of a little girl getting over her fears and like walking through the staircase and going outside the building, basically.
That's right. The staircase basically represented, I think, to me, is a hurdle, and it's a physical hurdle, but as you mentioned, it's a mental hurdle because it is helps her to be braver as a person. Like it's just, she's like, if I can do this, I can do it, I can do something else, right? And so I just saw that, I just love those little moments where like she's getting her own. If this was an action film, this would be like the moment where the action hero, you know, has like the big climax of, you know, like doing this big fight, but that's hers. Like she got to do this big thing. And another thing another small detail that I want you to go talk about. So the dad, Tahir, he knows how much his daughter loves football. He knows how much she's missing. He knows how much she's sacrificing as a child, and like how much trauma she's experiencing. He knows that the toll is taking on her. And one of the ways that he does acknowledge that and tries his best to help her get through this is that he brings home a magazine, and it's a football magazine. And on the front, I thought it was really interesting because I was like, maybe I'm thinking again too much about this, but it's a magazine, and on the front, it's a cover story about Messi, and then on the front it talks, it says like, it talks about how Messi's isn't really loved by his countrymen.
Yeah.
But while he's reading the magazine, because it's in English, like Talas, she doesn't know English. And it's not clear if the dad does speak English, but he doesn't read the actual story. He just tells her this story that he makes up about it being about talking about how fast Messi is as a footballer, how agile he is on the field.
Yeah.
And like that kind of plays back into the film later where he has to tell her to run and he tells her run like Messi. But I want you to talk about how parents basically kind of like change the narrative of life for just to make these things more easier for their kids, because the story is a negative story, but he actually spins it into something positive for her.
I mean, as a parent, I think, as I said, you would do anything for your survival and for your children's survival, and this plays a part of it. When you're seeing your child's dreams slowly getting ripped away from them and you can't do anything about them, you would do your best to provide that. And his way of providing that was to bring that magazine, because it's within the limits of his capabilities and within what ISIS allows, basically. And spinning that story around, I mean, in the moment when you're seeing the scene, she's saying, do you speak English? And in Arabic, it actually, she says, do you speak foreign language? Because she doesn't know even English or not. And he says, of course I do, and of course he doesn't, because he's looking at the magazine as if it's alien. Like, he's clearly making up the story on the spot. And I mean, he doesn't know what is written inside, even if it's positive or negative, but he realizes that it is his duty to create this brighter world or a vision for his daughter to hang on to. So I think Tahir here is really doing his best to make sure that his daughter dreams aren't broken. It's a very simple thing, very simple act, but I think in it lies a lot of internal determination of people who go through such situations. And you can see later in the scene where she's like looking through the pictures and Tahir's face is like really a bit rigid, and you realize that he's overthinking and he's realizing what this means and what is the situation and what he can and can't do. I every time I think about this scene, I feel like something touches me inside. I feel like really like a mini trauma, because it must be heartbreaking for parents in these situations, knowing that they can't do anything while seeing their children getting slowly like their childhood getting ripped away from them, and you're observing it. It must be one of the most difficult things actually for a parent to observe.
I imagine it has to be, because it's like it's a situation where they where so much is out of their control. This is one of the few things that they can, and one of the few things that they can control is like helping their children have a better perception of the world and just giving them that one spark of positivity, that one light that they can focus on. I think it's important, and for the film and for Tala, it is necessary, because it does give her a happy moment and a happy memory with her dad, because like that's one of the few moments in the film where she is settled and she's happy, and like her and her dad do, while they may not be able to understand each other necessarily on an emotional level because of everything that's going on, they are still close and they still have that moment to bond and to just be a father and daughter, like almost on like a regular night.
Mm-hmm. True. I mean, it is, she's getting a part of what she wants, but not what she wants, like she wants TV, she wants freedom. And this is like 1% of that freedom that her dad was able to provide for her. And this is the maximum that he could offer. So you can understand Tala, but at the same time, I wanted the audience to understand and look the father in the eyes and realize that really he's doing everything that he's doing out of love, and there's nothing more that he can do in this situation.
So because I know we've been talking for a while, so one of the things I want to go, because I appreciate this so much, one of the things I want us to talk about now is the casting and the production. So we talk about casting Eisheh. I want you to talk about casting Tahir, and the actor who plays the witch is Ziad Bakri. Oh Lord, I'm
Bakri.
guessing. Oh, I got it right.
Bakri.
Bakri. Ziad Bakri.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, just to talk about casting the actor Ziad Bakri, who plays the dad, and just like the process of getting him to work with Eisheh, because like she's new to acting, she's young, and for him he's older. He like for the story, because the story is a tough story to tell, he's able to process the story a bit more. So can you just talk about casting him and getting them to work together?
I mean, for Ziad and even for the neighbor's role, I knew I wanted to work with Ziad. He's like one of like the biggest names in indie Arabic cinema right now, and he comes from an acting family, and it's like a tradition in their family. And he's such a talented actor, and I knew I wanted to work with him. If not on this project, it was another project. I just knew I wanted to work with him and with the other actor for the neighbor, Khaled Tarifi, which comes from a theater background. For the both of them, we contacted, and we were quite almost sure that we want to work with them, but we held off until we casted Eisheh, because we wanted to see how the interaction and like if they're getting along, is there chemistry or not. So we casted Eisheh, and I remember she met the Khaled Tarifi, which played the neighbor first. And we went on a session together. We sat in a garden, and she came, and she was like afraid of him. She's like such a little young, like she's super tiny even for her age. And Khaled Tarif is like such a big man. And she came to him and she was like, hello. And he was like, hello, I'll be playing your neighbor. You can call me Ammo from now on, which means uncle. And she was like, okay, uncle. And he was like, come on, sit next to me. And I wanted to like start saying something, director, whatever, like try and do something. And he just took it into his own hands. And he was like, have you ever cooked before? And she was like, yeah. And then they started fake cooking with sticks and stones, literally. Like she was giving him a stick like a knife, and he was putting stones as if it's onions, and they were like fake cooking for 15 minutes in this garden. And then he looked at me and he told me, she's good, she's really bright. And he was like, good job. And they really like their chemistry I was just looking at them, and I was like almost like I was not believing what I was seeing. It was really magical. And then Ziad Bakri came from the West Bank, and he met her, and it was as a director, I couldn't have wished more. He introduced himself, and he told her, I will be your dad from now on. And she started calling him dad throughout the pre-production and the production of the film. Even till this day when they talk, she calls him dad, which is like the utmost like level of like, you can't ask for more, and they had such a great connection. Ziad is great. He's wonderful with kids. I actually saw him in a short film before where he had a daughter character as well. And I was like really impressed by his acting and his connection with the little girl. And I was like, okay, I definitely want to work with him. A lot of people told me that he's really good with children. He had a son himself, and Eisheh actually thought that his son is Ahmed.
Oh, okay.
She thought Ahmed is a real boy, and that it's the son of Ziad. And in the breaks, she would call him on WhatsApp, and they would talk the entire time. They became friends. And I didn't realize that I in the first days of shooting, I didn't really look into it. I didn't realize it. But the second day of shooting, the first day she wrote this letter, and the second day she came to me in the morning, and she was like, did Ahmed write back to me? And I was like in the situation, I was like, should I tell her that Ahmed is not real? Or what is my position here? Like it was so, like she was so believing into what we're doing, which worried me, like as a director and like responsible for this child, that, okay, what is the level we're taking this to? So we had to deal with her believing the entire thing, and afterwards, like me realizing, okay, she's really believing everything. We did this plan to phase her out of the entire story and the entire attention. So after the entire shoot, I stayed for a couple of weeks more in Jordan with a couple of crew members. And like the next day after the shoot, we were like spending half a day with her. The next day, little bit less, then skipping a day, then meeting her again for lunch, like slowly, gradually making it less and less for her. We took her back to the set. We introduced her to the real people living in that apartment. They were repainting it, removing all the fake walls. And she was looking at it like, not believing that all of this was fake. And we were introducing her to the people living there. And she was like, no, but this is my home. And we were like, no, it's not. So it was like really a process to take her out of it. Like we cut the clothes that she wore during the shoot. And like a week after the shoot, I remember I was having lunch with her and the sound designer, and he's German, and they didn't really speak because she doesn't speak English. And she asked him then, what's your name? And he said, yeah, my name is Johan. What's your name? And she answered that her name is Tala. And this was a week after the shoot. And we were like, no, what is your name? And it took her a minute, like literally a minute, to remember her real name, because she was like in such I don't know, like we put her in such a weird place. And I was really worried then. So I stayed a bit longer and we really like tried to smooth it over. But I think one of the factors is, one, she has a really big imagination as a child. And that's one of the reasons we casted her. And the second is she's super smart and super attentive, and you deal with her, you forget that she's a child because she acts in such an adult way because all the experiences she went through. So when you talk to her, she feels like more like 10 or 11, but you forget that she's really that young. So yeah, we had to balance all of this together.
I guess it was that she didn't really understand that acting is make believe. She couldn't really get the whole concept of make believe, and this is just a temporary world.
Yeah, she really dove into it.
Oh my gosh, she take method acting to a whole other level.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. So for the film, like, what has the reception been like for the film, and like even for Tala and her dad, like, and for people who have been through what they've been through, like, what has the reception to the film been like?
I mean, it started its premiere in Germany, and we were like, oh, I mean, this film started as a student project from my film school. So it started in smaller festivals in Germany, and suddenly it was like really like going all over. It won the student Oscars, and we were like really shock after shock. And now we're on the shortlist for the Academy Awards. And from the moment like they saw the film and the family saw the film, so it was during the pandemic, and we wanted to wait to show them the film on the big screen, but they were really anxious, and it was like all closed lockdowns. So the Jordanian producer went with the film, and she took like a screen with her, and the entire family gathered together and they watched the film, and I was on Zoom, and they were really proud. They were super proud. She was super proud of herself. We were a bit worried to show her the film because, I mean, in reality, she didn't understand the story itself because, I mean, we shot it in separate places, like it was separated. As a child, she didn't understand the scope of what we were doing, but like seeing it in one piece in half an hour, we didn't want to shock her. And we spoke to like some therapists and to the family, and like they were really fine of her watching it. And she was like, no, I want to watch it, like I understand, blah, blah. And we were like, okay, fine. It's like we delayed it as much as we can. And at the end, like they were like, no, she needs to see it. And she sat and she saw it, and she was super proud of herself. The entire family like was super proud. It was like an overwhelming feeling for them. I think that one of their community, someone who went through that much, was able to play such a big role and like be able to reach to deliver this message in such purity. It was an emotional moment. Sorry.
No, it's
It
okay.
was an emotional moment, and I was really happy. Sorry. So it's just
No,
my.
it's okay. No, I understand it. I understand
Yeah.
getting emotional because like this the thing for me, like for these kind of films is like we when we talk about war, like and like come because I haven't personally experienced war coming from the Caribbean. Like my lifetime, there was no war in the Caribbean or like living in North America, but I grew up watching the news.
Yeah.
I grew up watching like the wars in the Middle East, and like from the time I've been a child, like war has been unfortunately such a large part of my just my experience from watching the news and watching so many films and documentaries about wars. And then for kids and from people like you who grew up in the Middle East, like that's tangible, right? That
Yeah.
is an experience, that is a lived experience. And I think it's so impressive to be able to not just to like move on, but to be able to like just like go into the stories about these situations and about the people who have these experiences. And I think it's vitally important that we do get more films like this film, because people need to understand just what the acts, just how detrimental war is. It's not just about, like people say, oh, the wars cost like billions of dollars, and governments fund wars and stuff. Yes, they do that. But then like you have to realize, look at it from a physical perspective, from a personal perspective, and realize there are children like being born into wars, or children who there are people whose like their entire childhood is war. And like you do need films like this to just kind of like really get people to pay attention to that and to see it and to acknowledge it, and especially I think, as I would say, for people who live, especially I think in North America, who don't really, when they see war from a very particular scope, and like especially for people who grew up, who would have been refugees and immigrants, like when if they move to North America, like people say, oh, you're a refugee from Syria, you're a refugee from Afghanistan, you're a refugee from from like and from these countries, and like but they don't really understand just
It's
what
a
that means.
two-dimensional concept for a lot of people, I have to say,
Yeah.
sadly. And I think even for me, like I mean, I lived my entire life in Jordan, which is neighboring to war, like torn countries. I didn't experience war at first hand. I talked to a lot of people. I tried to my best to explain what this could feel like through my experience dealing with these people. But I myself didn't experience war, so but I did my best as a human to try and understand what these people went through and portray it. And I think it should be somehow a human duty for all of us to at least know a little bit more, be a little bit more informed, and be a little bit more sensitive with people who came out of these areas and these special circumstances, because these people aren't okay. Like these people are like, other than that, they left everything they know behind them, and they've been displaced and all of that trauma of like getting displaced, what they went through back home, that they usually bury really deep in their hearts, and they stay traumatized for a lifetime. So I think for all of us that didn't go through these situations, we have to be aware of this situation and what they talk about and what they don't talk about, most importantly. And I think it's a message to the entire world and everyone that sees this film that childhood is important for to form a healthy person, and you can't expect anything of someone who's getting out of war-torn area to be a normal functioning human. Like, this is absolutely, like, you need to give them the attention and the psychiatric attention. And I just wanted with this film to just highlight where dreams start getting broken and where these broken people start forming. It's just like that tiny place and time.
No, good. All said. Thank you so much for speaking with me, for making this film, and like you and Eisheh and her family and everyone involved with the production. I think have a right to be proud, and like you've done so. I think you've done extremely well. And you said it started out as a student project, but it kind of shows like it doesn't matter how much time someone has spent in the film industry as a filmmaker, like you have a vision and you have a story to tell, and like once people support you, you know, like that's what people need to do. I like, this is one of the reasons I like to do this, is to get people to like support like young filmmakers and aspiring filmmakers. So like we need these kind of stories, and like film can't always just be about just like, you know, like entertainment, just like, you know, minus entertainment. To me, no entertainment is minus, because I find a way to like dissect everything anyway. But just like you need a balance. You need the fiction and you need the reality as well.
Yes, true. I mean, that is the power of cinema. I think cinema really is like one of the most important and powerful tools in the world to make people feel with other causes, with other peoples, with other emotions that maybe you didn't experience yourself. So that's why I wanted to become a filmmaker. That's actually the essence of it. So I hope the message went through this film. Like everything you mentioned, I was like, wow, okay, you picked up on a lot of things, which makes my heart like really like filled with happiness. Thank you so much for having me, and like for like having the opportunity to talk in such depth about this film.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with me and for taking the time to talk with me. This has been so great, and I can't. But what are you doing next? Is there a film that you're working on right now, or do you have plans for a future film?
Yeah, we're actually, when we won the Student Oscar, we were already shooting our next film. So we received the news. We were in the middle of the desert shooting in Jordan. We're now in post-production for a short film. It's the story of two little sisters trying to get away from the fears their father planted in their heads. Like basically, it's more as well into psychology, society expectations, and what is it becoming a woman in such a delicate young age. Yeah, hopefully it will be done in a couple of months. We're in heavy post-production right now. As well, I'm working on my first feature film titled Salim, hopefully to go into production in 2023. Story based on true events that happened in our country.
Thank you so much, and I look forward. I hope I get a chance to speak to you again about this film that you're working on right now, and also for your feature film. So congrats on that. I know like there's a big shift that goes from making a short film into making a feature film. Like there's so much that goes into that. So like always give respect to filmmakers for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you for your work and for having me here.
Thank you.